And welcome to episode 4 of Homeline Heroes. This week, we've got Gonzo, my good old friend Chris Gondek, who used to play Counter-Strike and Quake 2 and Quake 3 in Unreal Tournament somewhere in the mid to late 90s. On the show today, welcome.
Fantastic. Thanks, Clem.
So you do have a trivia question for us, which I'm going to fail, but let's go for it. What's the trivia question?
Well, look, being the geek that I am, my trivia question is: can you recognize which operating system the error on my T-shirt?
Windows NT.
So Rob got it straight away. You've clearly suffered the same pain that I have at some point back
Oh,
in.
mate, you have no idea. Yeah.
But the fact that you went straight to NT, because some folks are like, I know it's a blue screen because it's clearly a blue shirt with some white text on there. But yeah, NT4, back in the days, you can see
Yep.
all the memory register dumps are on there.
Yep.
Back
Yep.
in the mid 2000s, I was still living and working in the UK, and there was a company called Errorware.com, and they had all different, types of like operating system crash t-shirts. So there was the Amiga Guru Meditation
Oh,
crash. There
wow.
was the Linux kernel panic.
Oh,
There was the
man.
sad Mac screen, but my all-time favorite, they had the NT4 blue screen of death, which anyone who's experienced, or should I say, suffered the PTSD of managing NT4 systems back in the day and reapplying Service Pack 6. This was the I suppose the worst situation to deal with. Yeah,
Yeah.
good catch there, Rob. Good catch.
Definitely been there. Yep, for sure. Yeah, it was I think I was working as a system administrator at a university at the time. So saw that many times. And part of my job was to kind of chaperone and kind of, help the system along, so to speak. But I loved Windows NT. I was a fan, so you know.
I think it was around the time, as Clem mentioned, we met each other in the 90s and playing the popular LAN party games of the time,
Mm,
specifically
mm.
Counter-Strike, Quake, which is what got us started. And so I guess the internet era was Windows 95 for me, and the familiarity of the Windows operating system is what I think got us
Mm.
jobs in the industry, right? If you knew Windows 95, you probably will get up to speed with Windows NT pretty quickly and certain operating system concepts and things like that. And then, yes, very much was immediately introduced to the blue screen of death shortly after.
Yeah. Do you remember Microsoft Bob?
Microsoft
Bob?
Bob, yes, geez, right, that predates Clippy, doesn't it? Was Clippy around at the
Yeah.
same?
Yeah, Microsoft Bob was something else. I was telling some friends about that, but that's like deep, deep lore because no one really it kind of just came and went so fast, you know?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you had the weird operating system where it was like a lounge room and there was like a dog and it's kind of a distant memory, you know? It's like this weird fever dream.
Gonna say
But yeah,
you're stretched
Microsoft
up to
Bob
full
was like,
PTSD.
yeah, it was something else, man. Something else.
So tell us about the first computer. What was the first mechanical or electrical thing that you built?
I think it will probably be definitely the first mechanical thing that I built. I remember being in year four. Just to give you an idea how old I am, that was 1988, and our school at the time, out in Western Sydney, Dundas Public School, made a decision to do some fundraising to invest in what was then quite innovative, a Lego Technics set. So these days, when you see a Lego Technics thing, it's already kind of defined. It's a tractor or a car or something
Hmm.
like that.
Hmm.
But our school had bought this giant, multi-thousand piece Lego Technics set and a book that came with up to 200 different things that you could build. And my teacher, he knew that I was a bit of a troublemaker. I was a bit of a ADHD kid in school, always messing around, always mucking up, sort of thing. And he knew to motivate me to keep quiet and do my work, I would get some time with the Lego Technics set. Well, he was right. He knew me straight away. Best teacher I still ever had, Mr. Turner from Dundas Public School, 1988. If you're out there somewhere listening, because I would get through my work in about 5 to 10 minutes, and then I would spend hours building
Oh,
every
nice.
single thing in this book. And then eventually, all the little cogs and gears and wheels and the electric motor,
Mm.
which would then start spinning things and that sort of thing. Programmable Technics would still be years away, which is also phenomenal. But I one day had gone through the book, built every single one of the 200 different permutations that were available. And so I just started improvising and creating random stuff. And I had endeavored to use every single gear and cog and wheel in the system to see how much power would be lost between the electric engine and the final, cog or wheel. And I put it all together and I showed it to the teacher and I said, "I check this out." And he goes, "That's great, but what is it?" And I said, "I just using every gear, cog, and wheel." And he goes, "Yeah, but what's its purpose?" I go, "I don't know."
It's gear
ChatGPT.
ratios, man. You don't know gear ratios?
And this is before I had any idea about physics and force
Mm,
distribution stuff like that.
mm.
So yeah, no, I was really genuinely fascinated by the fact that and this thing ran on like 9 AA batteries, of which the school started to get annoyed because I was thrashing through those batteries at least once every couple of weeks, right? Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool.
But
Oh,
yeah,
that's a
that's kind
great
of
story.
mechanical thing. Roughly around the same time, got my first PC and first console roughly around the same time.
What kind of
First
PC was
console.
it?
So the PC was an Amiga 500, and
Oh,
I
nice.
was super grateful to get one because everyone else had a Commodore 64, and I didn't
Mm.
have a C64. And what really annoyed me was that my mum worked for a company called Xidex, Xidex, which at the time produced 5 1/4 inch floppy disks.
Oh,
And she
wow.
would come home with stacks of 5 1/4 inch floppies with pirated copied Commodore 64 games and freely distribute them to my friends and my cousins who all had C64s. And here I am without a computer. But I kind of leapfrogged everyone when I got the Amiga 500 because Commodore had probably just acquired them. It was around 1987, 88, around that time, and I remember everyone from my school coming around to my house after school to see the graphics
Mm.
of this thing, to see the sound quality,
The
the
sound card too,
music,
yeah.
the sound card, yeah, the graphics and the colors. It just looked like it was an evolutionary leap forward from C64 to Amiga, right?
Mm.
And that was kind of also what introduced me to the demo scene subsequently from there. When we start thinking about, you know, pirated games, cracked games,
Mm.
we always have these little crack intros or crack tros, as they were called at the time. And I was really fascinated with the music and the visuals from these cracked games and the demos that, they would have been tiny kilobytes, right? You only had 720K, even if it was a 1.4 meg floppy for an Amiga, a 3.5 inch, right? Or was that what they were? The 3.5 inch? You had 5 1/4, 3.5 inch, yeah.
Yep.
And they had 1.4 meg capacity, but only 720K usable for an Amiga. So if the game would have been a few hundred K kilobytes, then there's a small space for the coding for the demo, music and graphics included, which is really
I
impressive.
know. Yeah, the compression. I mean, now that I'm older and I'm thinking about that old Amiga compression, it was just like, what was it, like LZH or something? Like, it was just absolutely amazing because not only was it highly compressed, but it was decompressing in real time
Real
and
time.
reading so
Yeah,
real time decompression reading into memory, playback. Like, it's just really, if you think about it, it's quite
which
incredible.
was
And
unparalleled
I
at the time.
think
Yeah.
no one really understood what was going on until much later.
And I had friends who had PCs and they would show off MS DOS to me and Xtree, and I'd be looking at it
Yeah.
going, maybe launch a
Boring, boring.
and then they would see the Amiga and they would see Crazy Cars and Super Ski
Yeah.
and eventually even Street Fighter 2 came out on the Amiga and that was phenomenal. 4 floppy disks it required, but it also
Mm.
required something else which took a lot of convincing and investment from my parents. The half megabyte of RAM upgrade to get the Amiga 500. It was called a 500 because it had 512K of memory, right? But to play Street Fighter 2, you needed a meg of RAM, and there was
Mm.
a 512K memory upgrade you could get from Games Wizards at the time. And I think it was
Mm.
a couple of $100. But if you bought it, it came with this triple game pack of Afterburner, Double Dragon, and I always forget the third one, but it was worth it just to get the games. So yeah, that came as a little circuit board with a switch. you could actually turn off the half meg upgrade because some games would just not work and crash with the extra memory.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you flip the Amiga 500 upside down. There was a panel underneath, and you slid the little, half meg of RAM, which is a big card. You think about sticks of RAM today, or even M2 cards, which are terabytes of super high speed flash. And I'm thinking, what? Geez, I'm aging myself now. Close to 40 years ago, half a meg of RAM was hundreds of dollars on a little card with a switch. Some great days there. Yeah. But console wise, the Nintendo Entertainment System. I'm a Nintendo guy. What can I say? I'm still a huge Mario fan to this day. I still remember the first time I went to a friend's house who had a NES, a Nintendo Entertainment System, and we were playing Super Mario Brothers, Metroid, Zelda. What else was out at the time? Gradius. There was and then Super Mario Brothers 2 came out. And I just recently watched a documentary that Super Mario Brothers 2 wasn't actually Super Mario Brothers 2. It was a different rebranded game because they were working on. They released a Super Mario Brothers 2 in Japan, which is based off the same look and feel of Super Mario Brothers 1, but the American market felt that it would have been a failure, and they were working already on Super Mario Brothers 3 at the time, which is more connected to Super Mario Brothers 1 when you look at it. Real fascinating documentary. Check out the making of Super Mario Brothers 3. It was really cool.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, I liked Excite Bike. Did you ever play that?
Excite Bike. Yep, absolutely. Yeah,
it was really good. And
flips
and there was
stuff.
the Olympics. There was like track and field or something. Like those were really fun.
Well, I think.
But yeah, it's tons of games, tons of games.
Well, there's also a really good documentary about a guy who collected every single NES cartridge. So there was, I think, around 400 or something around 600 titles. And the first, 570 of them were quite abundant. You can get them quite easily, especially in fairly good condition. Then you get to the last 30 and the prices start to increase, the rarity increases. And now I believe there is one or two, the last two most difficult to get, that you won't get for under $1 million for the game.
What?
Wow.
Oh,
Absolutely
man.
crazy. Even an official certified unopened sealed copy of Super Mario Brothers 1 inside original casing and everything will fetch easily over 100 grand today. Yeah.
Wow.
It's all us old guys grown up with money and resources now that want to relive our childhoods and start recollecting. It's the same with old cars increasing in Holden Tiranas and stuff like that. Commodore's starting to go up in price. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that definitely. So, did you ever use the tape deck on the?
So I had friends who had Commodore 64s with tape decks, and one of the things that a lot of folks forget, because they were analog, you could actually record a transmission off the radio onto a cassette, and then take that recording from the radio and then stick it into your cassette player with your system and load games from it.
I was going to say I had a dual tape deck. I had so at the time it was like you would kind of go to Paddy's Market and they'd sell these like off-brand dual tape deck boom boxes. And I remember I had to so I tweaked one of the tape decks to go a little slower than usual.
Yep.
And you could dupe these tape games and
so you mechanically adjusted it. That's awesome.
Yeah. So that way, because if you went a little too fast, the little blips would get the resolution on the blips would fade out because the tape, if the tape goes too fast, it's not going to pick up the some of the shorter blips. So yeah, it was and I remember a certain type of TDK tape did really well with grabbing those analog signals. But
I've still got a bunch of cassettes actually, and some of them audio. I've got a whole stack of them. I've recently went through the process of capturing my old VHS video cassettes and from a camcorder to digitize, and some of the audio is next on the list. So it easily take for like $30, you can buy for what looks like a Walkman with a USB connection, and that you put your cassettes in that, and it will just play audio to digital to your PC, so you can record it. or digital
Amazing.
to, well, digital analog to digital again, right? With
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, analog to digital, and then would it be analog again? Yeah, I guess it would. Yeah, maybe.
it's playing the analog through the Walkman, yeah, which has
Yeah.
digital content on there on the cassette tape there. It just
Yeah,
boggles
that's
them
wild.
how far we've come, right? You think about talking about half a meg of RAM through to recording analog sounds that were broadcast from a radio tower to your receiver, which would be then circumvented by dial-up, right? We got dial-up around the late 90s. I remember in 1996, we had one computer in our high school. I was in Year 12 at that point in the library that was connected to the internet. And
Mm,
Osmail dial-up was $5 an hour or something like that. And then
wow.
around that time, 33.6K modems came out. So this even predates 56K modems. And that I think that's around that time would be when it was the PC era for me. I remember when switching from Amiga to PC happened. I remember the exact moment, and I don't know if this is an upcoming question or not. So I'm happy to wait for the appropriate
No,
question.
no,
But
go ahead.
well, it was my high school, Macquarie Boys High School in North Parramatta, which no longer exists, became a technology high school the year that I started, Year 7, which was in 1991. And the reason why it was called a technology high school is they'd created a computer room with some Wang PCs. If you remember the brand Wang, they were 286s and they were all networked with T pieces, BNC cable terminators with a Novell 2.0 server. And I was fascinated with technology already. I think I was inspired, like most, probably by the movie Tron. If you remember the Disney movie
Mm,
Tron, tapped into
hmm
the computer, and programs have personas and that sort of thing. Then obviously having a home system and that eventually by the time I got to high school, I was very interested in any course that had the word computer in it, whether it was applications, programming, etc. And we remember going to the computer room for class and getting so interested in the setup that the computer teacher would allow us to come in at lunchtime to muck around with the PCs. And this would be my very first introduction to LAN gaming. Okay. Included with Novell 2.0 is what I think officially is the first LAN game. It's
Hmm.
called Snipes. Okay. And check it out on Wikipedia. Snipes, Snipes, right? And Snipes was a ASCII maze. So if you think ASCII lines, and your character was literally a couple of zeros for eyes, couple of carrots for eyebrows and a mouth. And you made your way around this maze and you could shoot in 8 different directions: up, down, left, right, diagonal. And you would work your way around this maze and try to find other players and shoot them with asterisks. So it was text ASCII on a black screen with little characters, and you would try and find each other and shoot each other. So this predates Wolfenstein, this predates
hmm
Doom, predates Quake, and we remember already being so addicted to this because we had never experienced the concept of all being in a digital world together,
Mm.
and the competitive nature of it was finding each other and shooting each other. So phenomenal. I already could see, I already knew even back then, this would have been 1992, 93, that, Snipes, the concept of network gaming, LAN gaming was going to be huge.
Mm.
Wolfenstein come out a little bit later, and Wolfenstein, while from memory was not a networkable game, you couldn't play against each other. It was the first 3D kind of move around world, find secret,
Hmm
and I think that's what um, I guess finally killed the Amiga for me. That's when I knew I need to get a PC. And my first PC was a self build. It was a 486.
Oh, cool.
I think you mentioned Paddy's Markets earlier. There was the North Rocks Computer Markets in the
Mm.
late 90s. And I remember burning my knuckles working at McDonald's, flipping burgers and making Big Macs and cheeseburgers to go and save up the money to buy the parts to build that PC, put the parts together. And we're talking in days when, there were so many more components. These days, everything's built into the motherboard and you're done.
And thousands
Right?
of dollars too.
Yes, the cost was significant. My first PC was a 486 DX2, 66 megahertz, I remember. Had a 40 meg hard drive, I believe, or it might have even been a 120 meg hard drive by then. And I'm just trying to think how much RAM. I may have had a meg of RAM, which I upgraded to 4 megs of RAM. And so we're
Hmm.
talking now 1996, 97 timeframe. This was the last. I think the 486 DX4 was a 100 megahertz system. Was the last or the fastest 486 before the Pentium was released. And I remember when the Pentium came out, Pentium 1, it was the first CPU that had a fan on top. Up until
Mm.
then, all CPUs were heat sinks. But this
Hmm.
this one was going so fast, over 100 megahertz, that it
Hmm.
needed a fan. And yeah, it was some really interesting and awesome times because that era of PC building was also the era of Doom and Quake 1. And I remember the only missing piece in my PC at the time was a network card. So it had a modem, right? Modem would be connected to the COM port or the serial port rather. And, by that stage, I think it was still 33.6K, but 56K speeds had been just announced. They were still very expensive for dial up at the time. Side story here. I hope that we've passed the statute of limitations. My cousin had got the username and password from his high school for the Aussie Mail account, Arthur Phillip High School, and he shared it with us. So we were all just milking the Aussie Mail internet with stolen credentials. This is back in the 90s now, so I'm pretty sure we won't be held accountable anymore. But a mutual friend of ours, and I'm sidetracking here a little bit, but a mutual friend of ours, Christoph Kowalski, who I think is also going to be on the show at some point. I'm going to call him out because he was a bit older than us and he was already in the industry. He was, I think, already working at Zircom or Compaq at the time. And we kind of all looked up to him. That's kind of how we got to meet Clem and other folks on that side of the family. It was my best friend's next door neighbor. And Christoph, who also was taking advantage of the dial up account that we were sharing with each other, had spoofed a email that appeared that it looked like it come from the high school to us, right, to our Hotmail accounts at the time, saying that we're aware of what you're doing, and you need to stop this activity immediately. So obviously, it didn't come from the high school; it came from him, but he knew how to change the sender ID
Mm.
and stuff, right? So we all freaked out and stopped using it. And we're calling up each other going, "Did you get the email?" Yes, I got the email as well. It's like, crap, they've found us out. We've got to really lay low. And Christoph's sitting there laughing his ass off because, he'd pull a number on us.
Yeah.
But it was awesome because, we kind of, through that dial up era, we were learning so much. We also went and bought NE 2000 network cards, which would fit in
Mm.
the ISA slot on our 486s and our Pentium ones. We had to buy BNC cable, T pieces, terminators, and that's what would start LAN parties.
Mm.
And I don't know if you remember back then, there were no LCD screens. We had our
Hmm.
huge, heavy CRT
Yeah.
monitors. We had our
Build
huge,
up those
heavy.
muscles carrying those
Oh,
around.
man. And Christoph, who was the oldest again, had his own flat apartment, right? We were all still living at home with mum and dad. So no LAN parties at our house, but he was kind of the cool older guy. We could go to his house to have LAN parties. And of course, he lived on the top floor of a 3-story apartment. You'd arrive to his house and you would have to kind of decide, what am I carrying first? Should I go the heavy monitor first, get that out of the way, or the tower, or the third bag, which had the keyboard, the BNC cables, the terminators, right? This was heavy copper cable. And even the cabling, the PS1 port mouse and keyboard, everything
It was
was
no
wired.
joke.
Oh, your speakers too. I mean, sound, right, was separate. Like everything was separate components. And I remember, you know, lunging up and down those stairs 15 times before we got the LAN party up and running, right? But that was problem one, right? Problem one was just establishment, get the PCs online, getting connected, right? Then there would always be that one individual trying to tweak their 3D Voodoo FX graphics accelerator, driver problems,
Oh
etc.
yeah.
R&R Blaster, I'm going to call him out. You may have him on the show at some point as well. He was the 3D effects, had the Voodoo, add-on graphics cards, which always had driver issues. And then there was always that guy who would be reinstalling Windows at every LAN. He was late to the game because for whatever reason, That's Tom Solkowitz. I'm going to call him out as well. He would always be reinstalling Windows for whatever reason. Now, once the network is online and everyone's got their PCs connected with the T pieces and BNC cable and terminators, 10 base to 2 megabit network, before you could start a game, everyone would be leeching first. And what's leeching? All right, if you've got a CIFS share on your PC where you keep your stash, and at the time in the mid to late 90s, it was about the late 90s, it was MP3 collections, right? I used to rip CDs with command line from the CD-ROM to the hard drive, and then I would use the L3 ENC command line to convert the WAV file that was ripped from the CD to an MP3. It took like 24 hours to do one album on a Pentium 1 back in. So I'd amassed a bit of an MP3 collection. Some MP3s were starting to appear on the internet on certain websites. This predates Kazaa and Emule and, you know, peer-to-peer. It predates Napster. It predates torrents and things like that. And so, yeah, it would be leeching first, leeching off each other. So the network would just grind to a halt. It's like, guys, come on, let's come up with an order one at a time. You know, one person leeches from one person, and then when that copy's finished, you just get someone else, and that way we'll stop all this disk contention. And they're like, yeah, no worries. But we're just too greedy. So everyone's like copying and jamming the network and, you know, flooding the network with copy packets and grinding everything to a halt. So by the time we finally established the game, and apart from Doom and Quake, Command and Conquer had come out at the time. Command and Conquer 95, CNC1, which was more of a strategy game, which was phenomenal. It was an amazing concept where you build up these bases and defenses and little attack units and things like that. And there's a really famous story amongst us as mates. In 1997, a few of us had gone either to university, to TAFE, or had entered the workforce. And a friend of ours, Tom, his parents had gone away to Poland for an extended holiday and left him at home alone with food allowance and a lot of trust, right? So naturally, we all moved into Tom's house for that 3 months, and all we did was play LAN parties and you know, figure out things like FTP and the early versions of web browsers and stuff like that. It was really great time for us because it was the foundation of what would become our IT careers. But one night, and it's really good timing actually, because this weekend is daylight savings, right? And I'm going to share this story with you. We're at a LAN party, happens to be that weekend, right? And we're playing Command and Conquer where we're all agreed, we're all allies until we've built our bases up to a point that we're all satisfied and ready. So we won't attack each other until, you know, we've all really built up massive defenses, massive garrisons of tanks and troops and, you know, and okay, we get to, it's probably about 2 a.m. at this point. We're getting close to 2 a.m. We're like, all right, we're ready. You know, we all had a break, had our drinks and stuff, built these giant, you know, bases. And it was always kind of known at LAN parties, if someone showed up late, bad luck. You have to wait because as soon as you disconnect a BNC network, it takes the whole network offline. So they couldn't join on the network, or someone would forget. They just unplug a cable to plug themselves in. They take the whole network down. Well, at 2 a.m., the game just suddenly crashed for everyone.
Oh.
And we're all up in arms like, oh, what's going on? We just wasted hours of work. Command and Conquer crash. And everyone's pointing fingers at each other going, who yanked the network cable? What's going on? What it was, if you remember, in Windows 95, they introduced the Windows has automatically adjusted your clock for daylight savings. Click OK to the new time. So that had popped up on all our Windows systems and crashed the game.
Yeah,
So,
Y2K. It was Y2K.
Well, Y2K was still 2 years away at that point, but yeah, people were starting to think about it and talk about it.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, I was a Y2K project manager in 1999. By that stage, I'd entered the workforce. But yeah, I know there was
that Command and Conquer experience, right? So you knew what to watch out for.
We knew how mission critical workloads and activity in technology would be affected and impacted by downtime. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And in fact, I will finish off that story. I'll wrap it up with when I was making lots of MP3s, I'd run out of space on my hard drive. I couldn't have enough space to rip the CD to WAV files because it would take up, you know, a good 50 meg per song, which you could get down to 3 to 4 megs with the compression. So I went to the computer market again with my hard-earned McDonald's money and bought a 3 gig hard drive, which would have been shy of $1,000 at the time.
Wow.
So, and I had a 1 gig hard drive. But this is the reason why I got into data protection, storage, and backup and recovery because I came home and I shoved in that second hard drive, IDE cable off the controller. Had to set the master slave switches right on the hard drive, so you would know which OS you're booting from and which was the secondary disk. And then before you could put a file system on the disk, you had to set the master boot record. So a utility called fdisk, if you remember.
Oh yeah.
DOS, right?
Still around.
Now,
Fdisk is still around.
fdisk is still there, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but you got to remember which disk you're working with when you're in the utility, and there was a command to switch the disks. I had set the master boot record on the wrong disk. I blew away everything, my entire life's work, all my MP3s, either manually created or downloaded from the internet, gone in an instant. And you know that feeling in your stomach where it's just your gut just drops, or when you saw this on the screen when you came into the data center, right? I was just like, what have I done? And it was at that point I realized why they aptly named the utility fdisk, because I really effed my disk. And it stands for fixed disk, by the way. But yeah, that's about the time I got into understanding how to do data recovery activities, of how backups are important, how I would go on to have a career of both an infrastructure manager and a data protection expert. I worked for Veritas for 7.5 years. I worked for Commvault for 8.5 years. About 15 to 16 years just in backup data protection, and would go on always in the back of my mind, that business continuity, disaster recovery. You don't want to lose your life's work, your MP3 collection. Yeah, some good times, good memories.
Yeah,
Because
I've done that about a million times.
that's a lot of music. I mean, where is it today? Oh, it's in Spotify now, right? It's just disappeared. I've still got most of those MP3s somewhere on a hard drive, or they were burnt onto a CD and then migrated to a DVD. But yeah, those days are gone now with streaming.
The CD disc wallets and the DVD disc wallets. Remember those big? That was another thing.
Still got
Recently
them.
in the computer market, you could buy those giant, 4 CDs to a page and about 50 pages in there. And that's it, and it's interesting because I am a tech evangelist now in my industry, and I always talk about data and how data is really the important thing to us. It's mission critical, right? Everything else is infrastructure to house data, and the infrastructure has evolved over many years. And there, you just said it there, Clem. You've still got your favorite music on MP3 format sitting on some storage medium, right? But your PCs would have gone through probably 20 to 30 iterations and evolutions since then. But the data remains the same. The data transcends infrastructure and the infrastructure evolution. And yeah, we've got to the point now where even removable media storage mediums mean nothing because the network's so fast now. We'll just use cloud streaming services and have instant on-demand 4K video, or your music in your handheld supercomputers, which were all separate devices back in the day, right? Your Walkman was different to your video camera, different to your calculator, different to all these devices. It's hard to explain to kids these days just what they take for granted. I remember encoding my first DivX when there was a mob. I can't remember if they were in the Nordics or somewhere. They had hacked the DVD encryption. So same concept, right? You could rip a DVD to the hard drive, and then you would encode it with DivX, or what's the word? Not encode it, compress it with DivX. When DivX came out, which was I think MP4 and stuff like that, and that's when we could get full-length movies onto the size of a CD, 700 megs digital format, which was still pretty good quality. So I was just fascinated with everything that the technology enabled for us. You could sit at your computer and be connected to the world first and foremost with the dial-up. Which meant that you had access to software and applications and other entertainment capabilities like music and video over time, and then be connected with your friends. So, fast forward to today, it's 2025. It happens to be a Friday. My typical Friday night will be around 8:30 once the youngest kid's in bed. I will be right back here and I will have Discord running. I'll have my gaming headset on and I will meet up with my friends who we used to lug those heavy CRT monitors and PC systems upstairs. Now, from the comfort of our home with my Ultra 4K monitor and my, geez, I don't even know what processor. I've got a Core i9, processor with a 3080 Ti graphics card playing Counter-Strike 2. We're still landing, but it's kind of more landing than landing now, if you know what I mean, right?
Mhm.
And we'll never shake it. We've been playing Counter-Strike for 25 years. Look at the
Wow.
esports now, right? Esports, Counter-Strike League. You go to the what is it? The place in Olympic Park, the Dome. Um,
Fortress? No, you're not talking about Fortress Sydney.
well, there's Fortress, but this one is the Esports League, ESL, and they do the Counter-Strike esports. I think it's the arena, Kudos Arena in Olympic
Mm.
Park. And we would go there and buy tickets like a giant in a giant stadium and watch people play professional competitive Counter-Strike. And I think when you think about all of the different, multiplayer online games, I know there's a lot of popularity in League of Legends and things like that.
Yeah.
But look at Counter-Strike. Yeah, and I think uh, going to watch Counter-Strike being played by professionals. And they call this esports because these are teams. They train, they practice, and you can see how they work together. This five versus five. When we play on a Friday night LAN party, it's every man for himself. Who can get the most kills? Sometimes we play versus, and it gets really frustrating. But excuse me, you watch the professionals play, and they will have different weapons. One will have the sniper rifle, one will have the automatic weapon, one will have the grenades and that sort of thing. And they back each other and they've got real strategy in different maps. And I think what also makes it really entertaining is the commentators. The commentators are clearly gamers who have been playing this game, interested in it for many years. They use the appropriate map names and stuff like that. And for someone who's been playing Counter Strike for over 25 years, a big highlight for me, and I have a little YouTube clip of it. I'm there in the crowd in Intel Extreme Masters. That's what it was, IEM. In 2019, just before COVID hit, I'm in the crowd and I had one of those scrolling banners on my phone and I'd put FY Ice World on my phone. And anyone who's played Counter Strike will know the Ice World map. It was the first map that was really tiny. It was just a square and you start on either side of the map and you can't buy weapons. There's just weapons on the ground. And you pick up the weapons and it's just literally a bloodfest straight away. And a versus map. We still use Iceworld to this day as a warm-up map, so to speak.
Warm up. The original Battle Royale, but it's only
Originally-
like a few square meters.
Literally, yeah. It's this tiny map, and when the camera was on me and I'm like pointing at the screen and it said FY Iceworld, the crowd kind of erupted, and even the commentators like, "Oh yes, we should bring that back into competitive play." So that was my little like 15 seconds of fame in the middle of an Intel Extreme Masters in Sydney during a Counter Strike esports tournament, which was a lot of fun. It's moved to Melbourne. I don't get to go as often, but the Aussie crowd is hilarious, and you'll know if you ever watch streaming versions of Intel Extreme Masters. Whenever it's in Australia, someone always gets kicked out of the crowd for doing a shoey. And I don't know if you know what a shoe is, right? You pour your drink into your shoe and then drink it from your shoe. Yeah. Every time without fail in Australia. We are, let's face it, some of us are the bogans of the world. In the crowd, someone's going to get kicked out for a shoey
Oh,
at an
that's
East.
wonderful.
So the question,
What
Gonzo,
about
is do you have the 20-year veteran coin in your yeah, you do?
I do have the 20-year veteran coin in my
Profile, yeah.
profile of CS2, absolutely, which is awesome. But
I'm trying to get the guy to create a 25-year.
what I have here, I don't know if you can see that esports league. I actually won. I forgot about. Oh, look at that! Comes with a card-sized bottle opener, which is pretty cool. But I have the Intel Extreme Masters. I don't know if that's showing up on screen there.
Wow.
Yes, there you go. Sydney, 3rd to 5th of May, 2019. I just remembered, I forgot there was a competition going. To enter the competition, they would give you a 3-day deluxe pass. And I won it because I'd written in and said, Me and my friends have been playing Counter-Strike literally for 20 years. 2019 was 20 years since Half-Life had come out in 98, but then the Counter-Strike mod, I think, was around 99. And
Mm.
so, yeah, they gave it to me. They're like, this guy is, way too committed to this game, 2 decades. Give him the prize, sort of thing. Yeah.
So for the other two episodes we've done, there was a strong connection to music and curiosity and building things and breaking things. Is there a music other than you ripping and downloading? Is there a story to creation of music or consumption of music?
I'm glad you asked because I completely forgot. Absolutely. The other main reason I switched to PC was Impulse Tracker.
Mm.
Me and all of my friends were either trying to be DJs, right? So 3 out of my 5 closest friends had 2 turntables and a mixer. It's the 90s, the rave scene, electronic dance music was blowing up, sort of thing. I was kind of more into just buying the mixtapes. But then when we discovered Impulse Tracker, and that was part of the demo scene as well, a good friend of mine, Martin, had introduced us to the demo competitions that were run where you think about the what was the event name? Assembly. Assembly was held in Helsinki. We eventually ended up going to Helsinki in
Oh,
2005,
cool.
2006. We it was kind of a bit of a mecca for us. And I'll share some photos with you guys for that one because it's phenomenal. Imagine a giant ice hockey arena stadium converted into what was just a giant LAN party, and then you would stop playing LAN games to watch the demo competitions on screen, and then go back to LAN party 3 straight days. People sleeping at their desks with pillows, like you don't leave. It was one of the most bizarre yet best experiences of my life. But coming back to Impulse Tracker, we realized that's how the music in demos was being made. You get samples, and you would enter those samples, and then you would have your sequencer with channels, different samples with the sequences, and then you would make patterns to put a song together. And this blew my mind. I'm like, I have the power to create music right here. And I was well into hardcore techno in those days, right? Gabba, the Sydney hardcore scene, DJ Jeff the Chef and Bloody Fist Records from Newcastle was, 200 beats per minute plus stuff. So I was making hardcore techno on this tracking software. And it's interesting because to run some of the really good demos, you would need not a Sound Blaster. Sound Blaster was kind of looked down upon in the elite community. You needed a Gravis ultrasound
Oh,
sound
yeah.
card, and they were expensive. I was very lucky that my mate Martin got the new generation Gravis ultrasound, and he gave me his old one so that I
Mm.
could both run Impulse Tracker as well as the demos from the demo scene at the time. So I've written about 6 or 7 songs. Doubt they would have made it anywhere into any chart on this planet. I would sample noises of like me and my sister screaming into a microphone, and then I would sample those screams into what would be, I guess, classified as more terrorcore than hardcore. Trying to make it. It would terrorize your ears, that's for sure, if you were to listen to it today.
If you have that file, please send it to us. We'll use it as the opening track.
Oh,
Seriously.
I'll send it to you, and you will hear me and my sister screaming into the microphone. My grandma would be from the kitchen going, "What the hell are you two doing in there? What's going on?" And it was
It's
just us
called
making.
art.
It's called art, grandma. That's right. Yeah. Which reminds me of my grandma cutting me offline all the time because she'd pick up the phone, and she was, a Polish immigrant to Australia, so she could barely speak any English, but also didn't understand what the scratchy noises were on the phone. And she would come into my room and go, "There's demons on the phone again. What are you doing?" That was her interpretation of. And I'm like, "Oh, grandma, you just cut me off the net. I'm in the middle of a download. 5K a second would take hours, to download whatever questionable material it was at the time, I'm sure. But yeah, the music scene was a big deal because tracking an Impulse Tracker, which, if you look it up, Wikipedia, was amazing technology at the time, up to 64 channels. You couldn't get that in a recording studio, a professional recording studio. And you could sample, wave files and then sequence them in those patterns. And what really impressed me, there was a demo group from Finland called Halcyon, and they made a demo where the whole song is just 3 samples.
Mm.
And when you see what those three samples are, and then you see how they've spread them and played them fast and slow, forward and backwards, sequenced to be long and short patterns, and it's a whole song. When you hear the song, you think this is amazing. Listen to all the instruments and sounds, and then you see it's 3 times 3 second samples. That's how they make a demo in 64 kilobytes that looks
Mhm.
like a full-blown music video. Yeah. These are the
Mhm.
guys that
Mhm.
would go on to code the games that we play today and the amazing, pixels and polygons and all of the stuff that's way out of my professional league. I knew very early on I was never going to be a coder. When I saw how much work was involved, I have the logical brain for it, but not the patience.
Yeah, a lot of that older
Absolutely.
stuff was written in very low level coding, especially on the Amiga platform. It was pretty hardcore stuff. And I remember like Octamed was only like 8 channels, and I think when it moved to the PC, it was kind of like the student became the master kind of thing. Where you've all or suddenly got like 16 on the Sound Blaster, 16 channels, and then like 32, 64 on the Gravis Ultrasound. It was just like started to completely blow away anything that the Amiga could do. And I remember the Amiga had some specialist sound cards, but they were more expensive than the MS-DOS and Windows-based sound cards, and that was kind of the beginning of the end, I think, for the Amiga. Because I had the Amiga 2000, and
Wow.
so it was able to do even more channels, but couldn't quite touch what could be done on a PC. But it still blew away the Akai S2000, which is what professional musicians were using at the time for sampling.
Yeah.
And I remember a friend of mine was kind of a quasi-professional musician, and he had the Akai S2000, and I would, boot up my Amiga and just like show what it could do with all of its like many samples and visual truncation for like shortening the samples and using it in different ways and effects loops and stuff. And he just couldn't believe it. He's like, you know, I
Well,
only
did
know
the
my S2000, but
did the Amiga have a MIDI interface, if I'm not mistaken, as well?
yes, yes,
First,
yes, yes. I had a MIDI interface into the Amiga, and I had a sequential circuits multitrack, which was like this old time synthesizer. I bought it for like $200, but now it would be worth just a fortune. It was an analog synthesizer. It was like had oscillators and LFOs, and it was great. Little sequencer built in, plus it had MIDI out.
well, speaking of data and collecting and holding on to data, I still have all the impulse tracker tracks that me and
Mm.
all our friends made. So they're .it files and they're quite small. Winamp will still play them. I still use
Oh wow.
Winamp as my media player on my desktop to this day. Even people see it just go, Winamp, really? Whipping the llama's ass.
Whips the llama's ass.
Why not have YouTube music playing on the left? I'm like, I don't know, I'm kind of old school like that sometimes, right? I've still got my old PLS M3U files, which are my playlists, my MP3 collection. I still have a NAS at home today. I actually work for the world's leading network attached storage company, NetApp. So
Hmm.
I never escaped. I've always been a data storage kind of infrastructure guy, and I believe that those humble beginnings of the driver to play network games was the motivation to learn, how to put a PC together with parts, and that came from playing with Lego Technic before that, right? How to network computers meant I had to install another card, which means I had to edit the config.sys file to have the DMA and IRQ lines of the card. I had to learn network protocols. Not like today where you just plug two ends of a cable in and they naturally talk to each other. We had to install NetBEUI or TCP/IP or IPX
Hmm.
SPX. Right? All of these skills, building PC, troubleshooting, software, networking, security, etc., was what got me my first job. Now, this is probably not common knowledge for a lot of folks, but I failed high school twice,
Oh.
right? Never went to university. I did subsequently later go on and get a diploma in TAFE and network engineering and stuff like that. But I feel like I was kind of born for IT, and IT just wasn't ready for the education sector or even the mainstream industry. In the 90s, it was so demanding for those skills. and it was thanks to probably that summer or that winter, which was European summer, where my mate Tom's parents went away, that we spent 3 months living at his house, like building and breaking and networking and, internet and OS and apps and stuff like that, is what really put me into that direction for IT. And 27 years now, 28 years in the industry.
No, that's
And that
really
sounds
cool.
that kind of sounds like hive learning because you were learning from each other, right? It's like a
Absolutely.
hive. So do you
I've learned
think,
pushing each other. Yep.
yeah, do you think that the new graduates that join organizations like yours, have they still got that mentality, or are they kind of like watching a YouTube tutorial or a TikTok on how to do something?
I think with all that instant kind of content on demand, information on demand, I even find myself in that same situation now. I would much rather quickly look up a YouTube for instructions on DIY and stuff like that. I'm glad that I've got that old camaraderie with friends that are still interested in getting together on a Friday night on Discord. We feel like we're not that far away from each other. We're still in touch with Martin, lives in Switzerland, as you know. His brother Mark, who attempted to teach me assembler code once back in the day, lives in London. They jump on in the middle of their day. It's our nighttime. We're still learning. We're still
Hmm.
playing. We create that community. So, I feel like the youth of today has such powerful technology at their fingertips that they take for granted. But they're probably playing newer games. They're probably playing more modern games, and there's probably more intricate campaigns that you can go on and stuff like that. With regards to learning from each other, I think about the IRC days. IRC was my. It's going to sound really sad here, but that was a very entertaining Friday and Saturday night in 1996 and 1997 was to jump on IRC and Dalnet use the MIRC client and chat with other people from around the world and around Australia and have IRL meetups in real life, socializing and stuff like that. These were all things that are, why am I thinking of like tears in the rain? They're lost with time, sort of thing.
So
Yeah.
the big question is, how many computers do you have now in your house?
Well, do you know what? Let me preface that answer first with how many devices are connected to my network.
Yeah, let's do
Because
that.
Hmm.
at one point, and I just recently upgraded my Wi-Fi to Wi-Fi 7 with a mesh network. I used to have the place so locked down that I would have MAC address control switched on. So I
Hmm.
would have to approve the MAC that joins. And I'm not even kidding here when I tell you there are at any given time 70 devices
I
connected
was
to
going to
the
say more.
house.
Hmm.
So
So
70. And people are like, what do you mean 70?
That's a lot of devices.
Well, three kids, right? Um, Everyone in the house has tablet, phone, smartwatch. Every device is almost a smart device now. My kettle, for example, smart speakers around the place. And then you start to think about, the security cameras, each camera itself connected to the base station. And then there's my home lab, seeing as we're talking about home labs here, which is a micro server that's running VMware with multiple virtual machines. Each one of those VMs will have an IP address and connected virtually to a network device. And then there's other devices that I completely forget, like
how many TVs do you have?
the smart TVs, of course. Yes, literally every wall in the house has a LCD TV mounted, running Android TV that's connected to the network. They're all running VLC, which can stream media off the Synology NAS that's
Hmm.
sitting just left underneath. So, yeah, I'm still collecting consoles. So I've still got all my Nintendo consoles from the NES to the Super NES to the GameCube to the N64, my Nintendo Wii, the Wii U, the Switch, and the Switch 2 is coming out this year in July. Excited about that.
Hmm.
PlayStation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's the Xbox, original Xbox, who Clem, a mutual friend of ours, Jason, used to run a business back in the day that would mod chip Xbox. I've still
Oh
got my
yeah.
original mod chipped Xbox. And when you power it on, the screen says X Mods Australia. It's still going, which is like over 20, will be what, 23 years old now. Xbox One came around 2001, 2002. So yeah, even those devices, an Xbox One has a LAN port. Anything after an Xbox One has a Wi-Fi connection. So yeah, once you count up all of the devices that you've got in your house, especially if you've got three kids with all their devices as well, easily 70 to 100 different individual MAC addresses with IP addresses on your home network. Yeah. And I've got gigabit fiber to the premises, which if you remember the first time you can made a dial-up connection at 33.6 kilobytes a second. Never in a million years would I imagine that one day I would have optical fiber to my house with 1,000 megabits down. It's just mind-boggling.
You're so lucky. I'm still coax off the fiber from the
Hybrid
curb.
fiber, HFC. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was unlucky when I first moved to where I live down in the Illawarra. That Labor had just lost to Liberals around the time, and they stopped the NBN project and switched all the
Mm.
technologies to fiber to the node. And so I had fiber to the node for a while, which got me up to 100 megabit. Now that was cool. A jump from ADSL 1 to ADSL 2 to NBN fiber to the node gave me 100 megabit, but then I still remember the day, it was about 5 years ago, when we got fiber to the premises, and I saw that speed test get up to the 968 megabits per second.
Wow.
Wow.
That's so unfair.
Oh,
But
it's
anyway,
phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. That's why I host. I'm always the host for LAN parties on Friday, not just because I've memorized the command lines to, do auto team balance and set the limit teams and, add the number of bots and then load the maps. A lot of my friends do regularly tell me if I'm not on a Friday or a Saturday night, they end up playing poker or Scrabble. But if I'm on, it's Counter-Strike. Always.
Oh, that's
he's
amazing.
he's definitely the evangelist. He knows exactly how to organize and put people to the right direction.
Get everyone
So,
together for the LAN party.
so what are you going to build next?
So my current project right now, I've been waiting for 6 months. HPE have just released their Generation 11 microserver. Well, they haven't just released it. They released it 6 months ago, but it's taken Australia this long to approve it to be sold here. Has to go through all the safety checks, the power connection, etc. I had literally just bought a Generation 10 V2 and sent it back because they announced the Gen 11 microserver. I'm very fond of microservers, Intel NUCs and stuff that you can do a lot. And why a microserver from HPE? Because it comes with an ILO, Intelligent Lights Out, which means that I don't have to be here or near it to get access to it should something happen with the host operating system, which will usually be a hypervisor like VMware. I'm thinking about mucking around with Proxmox or some of the other, like KVM and that sort of thing, especially since not to get too commercial in conversation, but Broadcom acquired VMware, and a lot of VMware cost has gone up, and a lot of folks in the industry are considering alternative hypervisor technology. So I like to dabble and play, and on my home lab, I'll have a number of virtual machines. One will naturally be a um, a jump host that I can connect to and do stuff remotely and put it in a DMZ. I'll have a domain controller running Windows. I'll have a virtual machine running a simulator with our storage technology. I like messing around with backup products. I'll have Commvault, Rubrik, Veeam, Veritas running on some virtual machines, and then maybe some apps with a database like SQL or Oracle or something. So, yes, I am that much of a nerd. I run enterprise software on my home demo lab to muck around with different storage backup networking techniques as well as keeping up to date with hypervisors and hypervisor management like vCenter and that sort of thing in VMware.
Are you running a 19-inch or a 10-inch home lab?
Uh,
Or,
say again,
or are you running a 19-inch rack space in your home lab or a 10-inch rack space or just like PCs on a table?
This is going to sound really bad. I'm not allowed to have a rack. My wife is since one fateful night when we were living in the UK, I brought home a Sun Microsystems V440 rack-mounted server under my arm. I was drunk when I got home as well, and she's like, "There is no room for that thing in our house. Where are you going to put this thing?" And she was right. I can't run. We don't have three-phase power to the house. This is why I go for the microservers, right? Low power. It's a small form factor. It's not rack-mounted. So it is a dream of mine, however, to one day have some sort of centralized rack space where I can have weapons grade video surveillance and You know, maybe I can take home an old NetApp system at some point and rack mount it
Yeah.
in there. You know, power it on, hear it fire up like a 747 taking off or an A380.
No,
But
I don't
yeah,
know if Clem told you, but I'm producing very small fractional nano ITX blades.
oh
So
wow,
they're very small blade servers. They use the Raspberry Pi CM4 or the compute module mounting system. And so you could mount pretty much anything that's CM4 compatible onto this tiny little mini blade. And by default, they'll come PoE powered. So PoE plus. So you
plus
could put in, and they all come with M.2 as well. So you can stick
amazing.
in an NVMe drive on the back, put a
Yep,
CM5 on the other side, and you can go as high up as a 16 gigabyte one. And then
fantastic.
I have a
Got yourself an
3D
ESX host.
printable, I have a 3D printable 10-inch rack version that you could put into your tiny little mini rack. And I don't know if you've seen these, but if your wife sees these, they're so cute. You know, they're tiny
Maybe
little
you
rack.
should be
They're like
maybe you should be
dollhouse
more open.
racks.
Maybe you should be more open to me bringing in my junkyard
So
IT equipment, right?
yeah, the latest ones that I printed out are in hot pink. So I definitely
Love
want to make
it.
these a lot more accessible and like home friendly. Like not in the
Cool.
regular drab, black or gray. But the really cool part about it is that they take so at idle they're about 2 watts or less, and then at peak they're about 10 watts. So with
Wow.
the M.2, they'll be well under, like probably around 20 watts, 20 to 30 watts. And the
So more sustainable.
PoE is between 20 and 30 watts. So you could run a single PoE switch, maybe a 4-port or an 8-port PoEs. I have the Unify Edge router, which is 150 watt switch, and it's easily able to take
Wow.
so I've got tons of I'm a Unify
Yep.
fanboy. So
Big.
I've got like, all of my doorbell, and I've got the cameras, and the UFO Wi-Fi um
Well, isn't it
antennas.
cool? Isn't it cool when you've got that grasp on technology, what you can do in your home? The first thing I did when I
Mm,
moved to this place, I ran Cat 5e cables. And so my mesh is a wired backhaul. And
mm.
people come over and go, how is it that I've got full Wi-Fi signal from right down the back of your house to the school across the road? Because I have flooded this area with my
Yeah,
Wi-Fi. It overpowers everyone else. Um,
yeah.
the recent Wi-Fi 7. But look, talking about all of the old collectibles, the consoles, I've kept some old equipment, PC equipment. I've got a 486 processor in my
Oh
drawer. I've got
wow.
the original iPhone 1 that I've held on to.
Mm.
Some accessories. But my youngest son, who's 7, he is obsessed with the history of Apple and the history of the devices. And then when I pulled out the iPhone 1 and showed him, you should have seen the look on his face. He was just elated and delighted. He's like, oh wow, an original iPhone 1. And to me, I'm like, surely that wasn't that long ago, right? And it
It's
wasn't.
like Lord of the Rings when they brought out the ancient elven artifacts, they're just like, this is old, deep lore from back
Oh
in the
yes.
day.
And he would spin out, just going, look at this. This is a real iPhone 1. I mean, I've even got I think I've got a Newton as well here,
Oh,
like an old
wow.
one with
Yeah.
a stylus and stuff. So one of my gimmicks when I promote stuff for an event or something is I'll talk about 1980s life hacks. And
Mm.
so one of my life hacks was to get a VHS tape, and if you can't rewind it in time, you get a drill bit, and you can literally just drill the cassette and rewind it with a drill. That was one of the ones I did. Another one was when you couldn't get a good TV signal, you would bend an aerial and stick that into your antenna slot. I've got a acoustic coupler, which I'm figuring out how am I going to use that for a if anyone remembers the 1983 movie War Games, Matthew Broderick, right? He
Oh,
would
yeah.
dial up
Yeah.
and then place the handset on the acoustic coupler, and he would hack into NORAD and stuff like that. I mean, all of this stuff which we look at now and laugh was
Mm.
super high tech, and it was the beginning of what would become the information age. It was us tinkering with tech, creating networks, and being motivated by things like gaming
Mm.
with each other over long distances. And it's sad because you might have seen very recently in the news ICQ was decommissioned. It was the
Mm.
first instant messaging, right? You remember switching on your PC,
Yeah.
and then doing your dial up, and the first thing you would hear is all your instant messages coming through in ICQ. You know, there's things that are gone forever, but you know, there's the new wave now. We're in the AI era of things now.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
another iteration, another innovation, another wave, which I'm really excited about.
Well, on that note, it was really great having you on, Chris and
Thank you
or
for having me,
Gonzo,
guys.
and great conversation. Lots of interesting parallels between some of the other Home Lab heroes that we've had on here. And I think we've still got many other stories to go. And I hope that you'll share those stories with us in the upcoming episodes. But thank you very much.
Thanks for having
And
me on.
from
Great.
and from all of us,
Thank you.
thank you very much and see you next time
Cheers, Clem. Cheers, Rob.
on